Joran Kale drifted in the outer rim, staring at the shape of the derelict before him. Its hull was rusted, pitted with old battle marks, and the docking ports sagged as if tired of holding themselves together. Most salvagers had passed it by. The official report called it worthless, a husk of metal that had outlived its usefulness. Yet Joran's instincts whispered something else. There was a faint energy reading coming from deep inside its fuel reservoir, one that didn't belong to any ordinary ship. He adjusted his exosuit sensors, feeling the familiar thrill of a possible discovery. The Zypherian sector was full of abandoned ships, and most held nothing but decay. But humans were stubborn. They had a way of seeing potential where machines saw scrap. Joran grinned under his helmet, knowing that courage wasn't just running into danger, it was stepping into places everyone else avoided. Docking clamps creaked as his small craft latched onto the freighter's hull. He checked the integrity readings. The structure was fragile, but the energy signature pulsed steadily. That pulse, weak but alive, called to him like a heartbeat in the dark. Joran tightened his grip on the control panel. He had no crew, no backup, no one to help if this went wrong. That didn't matter. Humans had faced worse alone and survived. The airlock opened with a groan that echoed through the empty corridors. Dust swirled in the weak artificial gravity as Joran floated inside, moving carefully. The lights flickered in irregular patterns, casting shadows that made the place feel alive and aware of his presence. He scanned the walls and floors, noting the damage, scorch marks, dents, and faded signs that once guided a crew he would never meet. Still, the energy signature was real, hiding somewhere deep within the ship's core. As he approached the fuel reservoir chamber, Joran realized the seals had long since broken. Panels hung open, wires dangling like vines in an abandoned jungle. He knelt and ran his gloved fingers along the circuits, trying to trace the pulse. It was faint, like the whisper of something alive, and it moved unpredictably, almost as if it were testing him. He frowned. No AI, no scanner, no logic model could make sense of this. Only a human could improvise, think outside the rules, and adapt. A sudden shudder ran through the ship. Joran stumbled, his hands sliding across the slick metal floor. The freighter's hull creaked ominously, reminding him that he was alone in a vessel that could collapse around him at any second. Panic wasn't an option. Fear slowed humans, but determination made them sharper. He steadied himself and looked closer at the reservoir. There was a thin, almost imperceptible membrane across the main chamber, pulsing with bluish light. It reacted to his movements, a subtle reflection of curiosity, or maybe caution. He crouched, fingers poised on the control interface. Joran had no idea what he would find inside, but he knew one thing. Humans had a way of turning the impossible into opportunity. One wrong move, and the ship could fry him in a burst of energy or collapse on him entirely. Yet he pressed on, heart pounding, mind racing, every sense alert. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was acting when the odds were against you. A sudden spark jumped from a nearby panel. Joran yelped, backing away just in time to avoid a flash of molten metal. The freighter shivered again, almost like it was alive and warning him to be careful. But humans had something that the Council's most advanced drones didn't: intuition, creativity, and stubbornness. He adjusted his tools, rerouted power cautiously, and tried to interface with the reservoir. It hummed back at him faintly, as if acknowledging his presence. Minutes stretched, though they felt like hours. Joran traced every circuit, every conduit, following the pulse deeper and deeper. It wasn't just fuel. That much was clear now. It had structure, intelligence of a kind, something that didn't belong to any human AI or alien artifact he had encountered before. The freighter's worthlessness had been a lie, a test for someone clever, patient, and brave enough to find it. He leaned closer, trying to pierce the glowing membrane. Suddenly the ship quaked violently. Something inside stirred. Sparks flew from overhead conduits. Joran grabbed a support beam, steadying himself as the chamber's walls hummed in resonance. The pulse in the reservoir surged, stronger, brighter, almost as if it were alive and reacting to him personally. His heart raced. He realized this was no ordinary discovery. Whoever, or whatever, had left this ship behind had left it for a reason, and humans had the rare audacity to see it through. Joran's breath hitched under his helmet. One misstep now could end everything. Yet he couldn't stop. The freighter was more than metal. It was a puzzle, a challenge, a chance for a human to prove courage and ingenuity in the face of the unknown. He reached toward the reservoir, hand trembling, knowing that the moment he touched it could change his life, and maybe the galaxy, forever. The pulse jumped again, brighter, faster, like it was alive and testing him. Joran stared at it, realizing the true challenge was only beginning. The ship wasn't just worthless. It was waiting for someone human enough to understand it, and brave enough to survive its secrets. And with that thought, the ship groaned, lights flickering violently. Something deep inside stirred, more powerful than anything Joran could anticipate. Whatever lay beyond that membrane, it would not remain hidden for long, and it would demand everything he had. Joran stayed crouched by the reservoir, heart hammering in his chest. The blue pulse shimmered like liquid electricity, wrapping the chamber in soft, flickering light. He could feel it, almost like it was aware of him, testing him. Every instinct screamed caution, but curiosity and determination pushed him forward. Humans survived where machines and aliens failed because they didn't give up, and Joran refused to be the first human to retreat from a challenge this extraordinary. He wiped sweat from his visor and examined the membrane more closely. It wasn't a normal seal. Thin filaments of energy crawled across the surface, almost like tiny neural pathways. Whoever, or whatever, had created this reservoir had made it self-aware in some way. Joran's mind raced. He had encountered alien tech before, but nothing had reacted like this. Most tech obeyed commands or failed silently. This was alive. Joran pulled out a portable interface device and cautiously connected it to the panel beside the reservoir. Sparks flew, sending his heart into his throat, but the pulse didn't falter. Instead, it seemed to grow stronger, thrumming in response to his presence. "Come on, old girl," he muttered under his breath. "Talk to me." He ran the interface, bypassing outdated encryption and scrambled codes. Lines of alien programming scrolled across the screen, twisting in ways he had never seen. Hours passed, though he barely noticed. Sweat soaked his gloves and his legs ached from crouching, but Joran's mind was razor-sharp. He worked with a patience and intuition no AI could match. Where machines saw impossible puzzles, humans saw patterns, connections, and potential. He traced a filament of energy to the reservoir's central core, adjusting circuits with careful precision. The pulse flared in acknowledgement, brightening and dimming like a heartbeat racing to match his own. Suddenly, the freighter shuddered violently. Metal groaned, and a warning klaxon, long dead, sputtered to life in the distance. Joran's stomach dropped. The hull was unstable, and even a minor miscalculation could collapse the chamber. He froze, listening. The hum of the reservoir had changed. It was louder, more insistent, almost like it was communicating. Humans were clever enough to notice things machines overlooked. Joran's instincts told him the freighter wasn't just a vessel. It was alive in its own way, a test left for someone daring enough to reach this point. He adjusted his tools again, carefully rerouting energy to stabilize the system. Sparks danced along the edges of the reservoir, lighting up the chamber like lightning frozen in midair. His hands shook, but he pressed on, focusing on the task. Courage wasn't about being fearless, it was about acting when fear threatened to paralyze you. Joran had no backup, no reinforcements, just himself against a puzzle older than the Council, older than most humans alive. A sudden tremor rattled the floor beneath him. He stumbled, gripping a support beam, eyes wide. The ship groaned as if it were protesting his intrusion. He knew the freighter had survived decades of neglect, but it could not withstand a single misstep now. And yet, it pulsed faster, almost encouraging him. It was alive, yes, but it was also waiting for a human touch to unlock its secrets. Joran swallowed hard and leaned closer to the core. "I'm not here to break you," he whispered. "I'm here to understand." He traced a filament with a gloved hand, and the pulse jumped sharply, sending an unexpected shock through his suit. He staggered but held on. His heart raced with a mixture of fear, awe, and exhilaration. No AI could feel this. No alien observer could anticipate this. Humans survived because they dared where others hesitated. Time blurred as Joran worked. Every adjustment, every careful manipulation, brought the pulse closer to stability. Sweat dripped into his visor, blurring his vision, but he refused to stop. Finally, the energy in the reservoir settled into a steady rhythm, like a calm heartbeat. Joran exhaled sharply, muscles trembling from exhaustion. He had done it. He had reached the point where human ingenuity met alien mystery, and he had held his ground. But the victory was brief. The freighter groaned again, louder this time. Panels above him rattled, and the chamber shivered as if warning him that the real test was about to begin. The pulse in the reservoir flickered violently, bright flashes of blue light illuminating the walls. It was as if the core were preparing for something, responding not just to him but to the potential it had been waiting for decades to meet. Joran's mind raced. Whatever this ship held, it was far more than anyone had imagined. Humans had been written off by the Council, dismissed as reckless scavengers, yet here he was, alone, facing something no one else could comprehend. The freighter was no longer a simple derelict. It was a puzzle, a challenge, and a treasure that demanded courage, intelligence, and daring to unlock. He knew he couldn't stop now. The pulse was too strong, too alive, and it reacted to his presence. Something waited inside the ship, something powerful and ancient. Joran clenched his fists. He had faced impossible odds before, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. And yet, humans thrived on the impossible. A sudden vibration ran through the floor, and a low rumble echoed from deep within the ship. The pulse surged, brighter than ever. Joran realized with a jolt that the ship itself was awakening. The freighter had chosen him, or perhaps it had waited for a human capable of understanding it. Either way, there was no turning back. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and reached toward the glowing membrane again. The pulse reacted instantly, flaring wildly, illuminating the entire chamber. Joran's heart pounded. The next moment would change everything. For him, for the ship, and perhaps for all humans who dared to venture into the unknown. And then, with a final surge of light, something deep inside the reservoir shifted, hinting at the secret waiting just beyond his reach. Whatever lay ahead, Joran knew one thing clearly: the ship was no longer worthless. And the real challenge, the one that would test every ounce of human courage and ingenuity, was about to begin. Joran stepped back, sweat running down his visor as he stared at the reservoir. The pulse inside shimmered brighter than before, almost as if it were alive, and aware of him. His hands still trembled from the previous shocks, but he knew there was no turning back. Humans survived impossible odds by acting when others hesitated. He had come too far to stop now. He crouched again, fingers grazing the glowing filaments. The energy reacted instantly, twitching and flaring like it recognized him. Joran's mind raced. It wasn't fuel. It wasn't a power source in any conventional sense. It was something else. Something alive, waiting to be understood, waiting for a human who could see it for what it truly was. He adjusted the interface device in his hands, connecting it carefully to the control panel. Sparks flew, but the pulse held steady, steadying as if it trusted him. Time seemed to stretch. Joran followed the flow of energy through the circuits, tracing each filament like a path through a jungle. The reservoir's glow reflected in his visor, lighting his face with pale blue light. Every step brought new challenges. Circuits that shorted unpredictably, panels that rattled threateningly, and the ever-present risk of the hull collapsing. Still, Joran pressed on, his determination sharpened by fear. Courage wasn't about absence of danger, it was acting despite it. A sudden tremor shook the freighter. Joran stumbled, barely grabbing a support beam. The ship groaned under its own weight, warning him that time was short. He had no choice but to keep moving. His heart pounded as he traced a particularly stubborn filament deep into the reservoir's core. The energy flared violently at his touch, sending a shockwave through the chamber. Joran fell back, coughing through his helmet, but he kept his eyes on the glowing membrane. "Come on," he whispered. "I'm not leaving you behind." Humans had always found ways to survive, to overcome, to turn impossible situations into victories. He wouldn't fail now. He adjusted his interface device again, carefully bypassing a scrambled circuit. The pulse inside responded instantly, brightening and dimming like a heartbeat. He could almost feel it thinking, probing, testing him. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning. Every careful movement, every spark, every hum of energy brought him closer. The reservoir wasn't just alive, it was a challenge designed for someone clever enough to solve it. And humans were clever. Suddenly, the freighter shivered violently. A panel above him cracked, sending shards of metal clanging to the floor. The pulse surged, brighter than ever. Joran's stomach lurched. The energy was reacting to him, but unpredictably. One wrong move could fry the entire system, collapse the hull, or worse. He gritted his teeth and focused, blocking out fear. Humans survived by thinking, adapting, daring where others fled. He was human and he would survive this. He reached closer, fingers trembling as he traced another filament. The energy flowed into his gloves and he felt it, not just physically but almost mentally, like a presence brushing against his thoughts. Joran's eyes widened. Was aware of him. The freighter wasn't a simple derelict. It was alive and he had awakened it. A low rumble ran through the floor. The ship's hull groaned and twisted, reacting to the pulse's rising power. Joran froze. He had no idea how far this would go. One misstep and the ship could crush him in seconds. Yet the pulse seemed to beckon him forward, urging him to continue, to reach deeper. Humans were capable of taking risks that machines and even aliens often avoided. Courage, intuition, and stubbornness, they were human strengths. Joran's hands moved faster now, guided by instinct. He rerouted power carefully, adjusted the circuits, and traced the energy paths as best as he could. The pulse hummed in response, brighter and more focused. Sparks danced across the reservoir's surface, but the energy held steady. He exhaled sharply, muscles trembling from exhaustion. Every move had to be precise. One mistake could end everything. Then, without warning, the chamber shook violently. The pulse flared, sending blinding light across the walls. Joran grabbed a support beam, his visor fogged with sweat. The freighter's hull groaned in protest, as if the ship itself were testing him, pushing him to see if he had the courage and skill to survive. Joran's mind raced. Humans were often dismissed in the galaxy as reckless, impulsive, fragile. Yet here he was, facing an alien system that no AI could comprehend, no alien could predict. He was human and he was capable. He could think, improvise, and act where others would fail. His fingers traced one last filament, guiding energy carefully into the reservoir's core. The pulse responded, stabilizing into a steady, glowing rhythm. Joran's breath came in short bursts. He had done it. He had reached the point where human determination and ingenuity had met something extraordinary. But even as relief began to settle, a new realization struck him. The ship wasn't done with him. The pulse was stronger now, almost intelligent, and the freighter shivered once more violently than before. Joran stepped back, gripping the edge of a support beam. The membrane glowed, brighter than ever, as if preparing for something. His heart raced. This wasn't just discovery, it was a challenge, a test left for a human capable of understanding it. The freighter had secrets, and they were only beginning to reveal themselves. He swallowed hard. Whatever lay ahead would require everything he had: courage, intelligence, and determination. The ship had awakened, and the real challenge was about to begin. One touch, one wrong move, and it could all end in seconds. Yet Joran knew he was ready. Humans thrived in the impossible. And with that thought, he reached forward again, the pulse surging in response. The glow flared, illuminating the entire chamber. The freighter trembled, alive and waiting, and Joran knew one thing with certainty: the adventure was just beginning. Joran's pulse raced as the freighter shuddered beneath him. The glowing reservoir hummed in steady rhythms, brighter and more intense than ever before. It wasn't just a ship anymore, it was something alive, something aware, something testing him. He could feel it in every fiber of his being, and a thrill ran through him. Humans survived impossible odds because they dared when others would run. Now was his moment to prove it. He adjusted his interface device again, fingers moving with precision, rerouting energy flows and aligning circuits. Sparks danced across the chamber, but the pulse didn't falter. It seemed to respond to him, guiding his hands, almost communicating without words. The ship itself felt like a living puzzle, and Joran was the first human clever enough to solve it. His heart pounded as he realized this was more than discovery. This was a test of courage, intelligence, and human determination. Suddenly, the freighter groaned violently, the hull twisting as if it had a mind of its own. Panels cracked and shards of metal clattered to the floor. Joran stumbled but regained his footing, eyes wide. The energy pulse flared in response, bright flashes illuminating the chamber like lightning frozen midair. It was reacting to his presence, and the stakes were higher than ever. One wrong move could fry the circuits, collapse the hull, or worse, release the energy in a destructive surge. Joran swallowed hard. Fear was a companion, but it wouldn't stop him. Humans had survived worse, improvised when everything else failed. He traced a stubborn filament of energy, guiding it deeper into the reservoir. The pulse responded instantly, almost impatiently. It was alive, aware, and waiting for him to take the next step. Humans were the only species capable of seeing the impossible and daring it to become possible. As he worked, a sudden vibration ran through the floor. The freighter trembled, warning him that its structure was fragile. Joran gritted his teeth. The pulse surged again, brighter and faster, almost like a heartbeat racing to match his own. Sweat streamed into his visor, blurring his vision, but he blocked it out. Every move had to be precise. Humans succeeded where others failed because they could combine courage, intelligence, and relentless determination. Hours, or maybe minutes, time had no meaning, passed as Joran carefully traced each filament, rerouted energy, and stabilized circuits. The pulse flared, brightening and dimming like it was alive. He realized with a thrill that it recognized him. He was not just a human in a ship. He was a participant in something greater, a being capable of understanding and cooperating with alien intelligence. The The freighter had waited centuries for this. Suddenly the chamber shivered violently. A panel above him cracked, sending sparks and metal fragments skittering across the floor. The freighter groaned almost as if protesting, but Joran held his ground. He leaned closer to the glowing membrane, tracing energy flows with careful precision. The pulse surged again, brighter than ever, and he felt it brushing against his mind, probing, testing him. Humans survived not by brute force, but by ingenuity, by daring to face what others would flee. Joran's fingers trembled as he adjusted the interface again. Every circuit, every filament, every tiny adjustment mattered. The freighter's hull creaked and twisted, responding to the energy inside. It was alive and it was aware of him. Sweat soaked his gloves, muscles ached, but he pressed on. He could feel the pulse strengthening, almost communicating, guiding him closer to the core of the reservoir. This was a challenge designed for someone human, stubborn, clever, and courageous. A sudden, sharp vibration ran through the floor. Sparks shot from exposed circuits and the chamber shook. Joran stumbled, gripping a support beam to steady himself. The pulse surged wildly, brighter than ever, illuminating the walls with an almost blinding light. The freighter's structure seemed to breathe, alive and responsive. One misstep could collapse the hull or release energy uncontrollably. Yet Joran's mind was clear, focused. Humans survived because they could think, adapt, and act under impossible pressure. He traced another filament, guiding it to the core. The pulse followed, brightening and stabilizing as if approving his actions. Joran's breath came in ragged bursts, his visor fogged with sweat. Fear clawed at him, but courage drove him onward. He was alone, facing a ship alive with unknown energy, yet he did not retreat. Humans thrived in the impossible, and this was a moment to prove it. Then a low rumble shook the freighter. The pulse surged, almost violently, and the walls vibrated as if the ship itself were awakening. Joran's heart leapt. He realized that this was no ordinary vessel. It was a living system, waiting for a human capable of understanding it. The energy flickered, tendrils of light stretching toward him as if testing his resolve. He clenched his fists and reached forward, fully committing to the next step. The glow flared, illuminating the entire chamber, and the freighter quaked more violently than before. Joran felt the pulse brushing against him, alive and aware, waiting for him to unlock its secrets. He knew the next moment would change everything, for him, for the ship, and possibly for the galaxy. Humans had been dismissed, underestimated, and doubted for centuries. Yet here he was, alone, facing an impossible challenge, and rising to meet it. With a deep breath, Joran touched the glowing membrane. The pulse reacted instantly, brighter and steadier than before, flooding the chamber with pure energy. He felt a surge of connection, as if the freighter itself recognized his courage, intelligence, and human determination. Sweat ran down his face, muscles trembled, but he held on, understanding that this moment was just the beginning. The freighter groaned again, deeper this time, like a creature stirring after centuries of slumber. The pulse surged in response, almost impatiently as if urging him forward. Joran realized with a jolt, the real challenge had only just begun. Humans thrived where others failed. They endured, adapted, and overcame. And now, facing a ship alive with mysterious energy, Joran knew he was about to prove it once more. A shadow flickered across the chamber walls, something moved deeper inside the ship. Joran's heart leapt. Whatever waited in the core was more than energy, it was intelligence, awareness, and perhaps even intention. The freighter had chosen him or at least recognized him. Either way, there was no turning back. The pulse surged again, brighter and faster, and the freighter groaned in a low, resonant tone. Joran squared his shoulders. Humans survived the impossible. Humans thrived where others fled. And this was the moment to show it. The adventure, the true test of courage, intelligence, and determination, was about to begin. Joran's hands trembled as he hovered over the reservoir's glowing core. The pulse inside throbbed like a heartbeat, brighter and more insistent than ever. Every fiber of the freighter seemed alive, vibrating with anticipation, as if testing him to see if he was worthy. Sweat stung his eyes, muscles ached, and yet he refused to back down. Humans survived impossible odds because they acted when others hesitated. Courage, intelligence, and stubbornness, these were the traits that had brought him here, and they would see him through the ultimate challenge. He adjusted the interface device one last time, rerouting the reservoir's energy through carefully calculated channels. Sparks danced along the edges of the glowing membrane, threatening to scorch him, but he held firm. The pulse responded immediately, flowing through his gloves, sending a shiver up his arms. Joran realized with a thrill that the ship was aware of him. Not just aware but reactive, almost intelligent in a way he had never encountered. No AI, no alien, no council bureaucrat could comprehend this. Only a human could improvise, adapt, and survive in a situation like this. The freighter groaned, twisting slightly as if flexing its massive frame. Panels rattled, some cracked under the stress, sending sparks raining down. Joran's stomach lurched. He had no reinforcements, no backup, and if he made a mistake now, the freighter could collapse, fry the core, or worse, release a surge of energy powerful enough to vaporize everything within the chamber. But retreat was not an option. Humans thrived on challenge. Where others faltered, they adapted and overcame. He leaned closer, feeling the pulse extend thin tendrils of energy toward him. It was testing him, gauging his courage and ingenuity. Joran's heart pounded. He could hear the faint hum of the alien intelligence syncing with his interface, almost like it was waiting for him to make the first decisive move. Sweat poured down his visor, but he blocked it out. Focus was everything now. Fear would kill him, precision would save him. Then a violent shudder ran through the freighter. A panel overhead cracked, sparks flying dangerously close. Joran stumbled but managed to grab a support beam. The pulse flared in response, brighter and faster, and he realized the freighter itself was alive in a way that could challenge even the most advanced AI. The ship had waited centuries for someone capable of this. It had chosen him. Humans were not supposed to be able to do this, and yet here he was, alive, calculating, courageous, daring. Joran adjusted the interface device again, carefully weaving the energy flows through the reservoir circuits. Each filament he touched reacted instantly, aligning with his adjustments. The pulse surged as if approving his actions. He felt a connection forming, one that went beyond technology or instinct, something almost sentient. The freighter wasn't just a vessel, it was a living system that had been waiting for a human to unlock its potential. And he was that human. Hours, or maybe minutes he could not tell, passed as he guided the energy. The freighter quaked around him, groaning and rattling. Sparks flew, metal creaked, and yet he pressed on, hands steady despite exhaustion. The pulse brightened with every successful adjustment, radiating a sense of recognition, almost as if it trusted him. The freighter's energy swirled and pulsed, alive and responsive, waiting for the moment when a human could fully unlock it. Suddenly, a new challenge arrived. Sensors picked up movement outside the chamber. Joran's chest tightened. The Zypherian Council's patrol ships had arrived in orbit, drawn by the same signal that had guided him. They had sent drones to secure the freighter, assuming a human scavenger could never control it. Their confidence was misplaced. Humans survived by daring where others feared. Joran clenched his fists, determination flooding him. They would not take what he had earned. The freighter shuddered again, almost as if sensing the new threat. Its energy pulse reacted, tendrils of light extending toward the control panels as if preparing for defense. Joran's mind raced. He could guide the alien intelligence to outmaneuver the Council drones, using the freighter itself as a weapon if necessary, but only if he remained precise and fearless. One misstep and it could all be lost. Humans thrived on courage, but precision and quick thinking were their ultimate advantages. He synchronized fully with the pulse, letting the energy flow through his gloves, his interface, and into his mind. The freighter responded instantly, shields igniting across the hull, thrusters powering up, systems recalibrating. Sparks of energy raced along the walls, forming glowing barriers that blocked the drone's sensors and weapons. The pulse surged stronger than ever, almost alive in its excitement. Humans had ingenuity where others relied on brute force. This was the proof. The Council drones advanced, but the freighter twisted, spun, and surged in ways they could not predict. The energy core inside pulsed with intelligence, guiding Joran to execute maneuvers that defied logic. Drones collided with debris, sensors overloaded, and one by one they were disabled, not destroyed but neutralized, outsmarted by human daring and ingenuity. Joran's heart raced. He had taken a ship deemed worthless, and turned it into a force even the Council could not control. Finally, with one precise adjustment, the reservoir stabilized completely. The freighter glowed like a living being in full awareness, energy flowing smoothly, pulse steady and strong. Joran exhaled sharply, muscles trembling with exhaustion, relief, and awe. He had done it. Humans had triumphed where others would have failed. Courage, intelligence, and determination had made the impossible possible. He floated in the chamber, staring at the glowing core. The freighter's pulse hummed softly, almost like it was speaking to him. It had recognized his worth. Humans were capable of the extraordinary. He had proven it, not to the council, not to the galaxy, but to himself. The freighter was alive, powerful, and now allied with a human who had the courage to face the impossible. Joran smiled under his visor, fatigue mixing with triumph. The freighter's systems hummed in sync with his own heartbeat. Humans had been underestimated for centuries. They had been called reckless, fragile, insignificant. Yet here he was, alone, surviving, adapting, and overcoming a challenge that would have defeated any AI or alien mind. The pulse inside the reservoir surged one final time, bright and steady. The freighter had awakened fully, alive and responsive. Joran knew the galaxy would never see a human the same way again. Humans could face the impossible and they could win. He floated there for a long moment, savoring the victory, knowing the adventure was far from over. Beyond the chamber doors, council forces still waited, unaware that the worthless ship was no longer theirs to claim. Joran's courage, intelligence, and determination had turned derision into awe, danger into triumph, and discovery into proof that humans were more than survivors. They were extraordinary. And as the freighter's pulse pulsed in sync with his own, Joran understood the truth. The universe had underestimated humans, but he had just proven that under the impossible odds, humans could shine brighter than anything else.